great. And that's
And this is a
Sheila Robot.
Her name. She lives in Manchester, and
Right.
I
Is she in
would think
Manchester?
Manchester.
Yeah.
She moved to Manchester.
And it's a tangent from the Vietnam War, but there were a group of American women who were instrumental in the English women's movement.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing.
I'll show you a picture.
Shelley being one of the prime ones.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what I'm finding so fascinating about the whole project, is that actually it's clearly not, I mean, it starts off as this sort of Vietnam thing, but actually it's, you know, that's only, it seems only to be a part of the wider movement,
Right, because
which takes into account.
in the late '60s it was
Exactly.
there was a
yeah.
multifaceted movement.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, exactly.
And 68 in itself was important, and that also corresponded to the tour of the Living Theater, and you've probably come across that.
Yeah,
And that had a big impact,
yeah.
and the Roundhouse. And
Yeah, the
all
dialectics
events
of
there.
liberation,
Yeah,
and all of that anti-psychiatry movement.
And there was that agitprop group in London that was
Yeah.
also
Well,
there.
Sheila, yeah.
No, well, she was involved, but
Yeah.
what was his name?
Agitprop.
Agitprop, I forgot his name.
Oh,
Anyway.
yes. Oh, marvelous character.
Yeah, marvelous character. Julia Mitchell was involved with them.
Was it an American chap or a British?
No.
No, it was British.
Because Tarek Ali was central to a lot of it with the VSC.
Who?
Tarek Ali.
No, Tarek came later.
Tarek.
I mean,
Tarek
this was a
Ali.
little earlier. It was like 67, 68. And what was his name? I have to think about it. He had an unusual name.
I mean,
Who's this you're trying to remember now?
He was the main person in Agitprop, and they had street theater.
Yeah, I
and
remember
He was
Agitprop.
marvelously imaginative
Yeah.
about
Yes,
the stuff that he did.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm gonna look it up.
He
I'm
lived
gonna
in
see if I
East
find
London.
We could easily spend most of the evening trying to remember people's names and who they were. But don't let us do that.
Yes, yes, but I'll look it up for you.
You've seen this?
Well, I'll shoot.
I think I have. Yeah. Thank you. I can't remember if I have seen this. Would it be okay for me to take photos
it's my
of
copy,
this
and you can take
Well,
it.
why don't I
You
just
can return
Xerox it?
Well,
I'll
if you want to
scan it.
Xerox it, you
I'll
can.
scan it.
I've got camera.
Oh, whatever, sure.
Whatever.
That's great. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay.
But so yeah, initially, because I mean, as I said, it's kind of trying to. It seems there's this group and trying to get your head around this period and from as a young guy and now
Right.
it seems terribly complicated, and that almost there was factions of factions. You got Maoists and Trotskyists and Stalinists and communists and
Yeah, we
people
know
about.
this.
And so, in that, where did you come into that? I mean, you were the Stop It were a group who were obviously primarily opposed to the Vietnam War, but was there a particular political slant you took?
I mean, where I would pick up the narrative would be to say that in 1966, fall of 1966, the London School of Economics had a master's program in political sociology. Ralph
Right.
Delaban was teaching it.
Yeah.
And for some reason, because maybe everything was just the timing of what was going on in the United States, there were about a dozen people who came directly from SDS in the United States and ended up at the LSE in American. So it was like there was this political hotbed right away of people
Yeah.
that were very directly involved in the movement back here and bringing a lot of those ideas to London. And
Right.
Danny Schechter being, I don't know if you've
Yeah.
come across that name.
Yeah, he was a key figure. Right?
Yeah, Danny was definitely very heavily involved in a lot of stuff here, and he brought a lot of that stuff over there. So there was this mentality which was that the revolution's happening in the United States. The SDS was feeling its oats, and people were feeling like we really we knew how to do political stuff. And we got to the LSE and we ran into all these Trotskyists who were still arguing about the Moscow trials and
Yeah.
stuff like that. And we had like a different activist bent to it and stuff. And so I think a lot of us tried to figure out how to reinvigorate what we saw as a kind of a moribund or old left English scene.
Yeah.
So in a lot of different ways we tried to bring those ideas in. So anyway, there was this group at the LSE in 1966 to 67. And then in the summer of 67, we knew that there was the Stop the Draft Week had already been announced for October of 1967 in the United States. And so a group of us got together and decided that we would do a parallel action in London. So a bunch of us turned in our draft cards at the U.S. Embassy on October 15th or 16th or 17th or whatever it was of 1967. And that was really the beginning of, to my recollection, that was the beginning of Americans acting as Americans in London. We had a big thing where we went and pasted our draft cards to the front door of the U.S. Embassy. And then there was a big rally in Trafalgar Square, and some of us spoke at that rally as Americans, and we realized that we had a lot of credibility or a lot of clout because we could speak as people who were, fighting the war at home as it were, or whatever. So that was the beginning of that, and that's when Stop It formed. Was at the beginning of, was in the summer of 1967, and at least the kernel of it germinated then. And the initial thing that spurred into action was to try to be part of this Stop the Draft Week in October of 1967. And we also, just one other thing I remember, which you may go back, you may be able to find. I mean, and we also we got interviewed on CBS, Huntley Brinkley or whatever, and it sort of caught it'll have like its 15 minutes of fame kind of thing because it was a different angle that the media could use.
Yeah.
And so, and then it picked up, and then from there
we got to play in the States?
Oh yeah.
Or in Britain?
No, we're going to play in the States, but then I think it echoed back. It was like, oh yeah, this is like a real thing. There are these Americans in London who were opposed to the war. Yeah. And then we became more of an organization, and we found that there were lots of opportunities for us to speak because people felt like, we had a story to tell.
So Stop It grew out of the LSE? Or?
No. It just happened that some of the people that got it going were at the LSE, and what I'm trying to sort of describe, which is a little more amorphous, is that Stop It was one manifestation of this new left initiative or new left politics that was coming from the United States. And I mean, we somewhat arrogantly, I think, definitely arrogantly thought, we know how to do stuff. And so we had this activist mentality. And one way that it manifested itself was in the anti-war, anti-Vietnam War, and the Stop It thing. The women's movement was also part of it. There's Angry Arts. There were a whole bunch of other things that were being done.
So do you think that you, as a group of Americans, were heavily influential on the British in the way that they responded? So, for example, at the LSE with the strike that they had, do you think that was?
Well, I was going to tell you. I mean, the other thing you might want to look at, which is only, I mean, the LSE is like a whole story, a whole separate story. Yes. I was there. I ended up getting thrown out in 1969 for activities involved with the strike.
And this was when you were an undergrad?
No, I was getting out. Well, I had gotten my master's in 1967 from the LSE. I was in the PhD program in Alabama, and then I got thrown out.
Right.
But there were. I don't know if you've read it. There were a bunch of strikes and occupations of the LSE, and we occupied the LSE in order to provide lodging and silkscreen facilities and everything else to the anti-Vietnam demonstrations that were taking place in London. So there would be a mobilization in London for the anti-Vietnam mobilization. So we would say, okay, anybody can stay at the LSE.
Right. And
so we had huge battles within the student union and huge battles with the administration to liberate the LSE so it could be available. And that was definitely, there were the IS people, the International Socialists and Trotskyists, and they were good people, but there was a different mentality. And so there's a book called LSE, The Natives Are Restless. I don't know if you're going to be able to find that or not. Written by a guy named Paul Hoch, H-O-C-H.
Okay.
But you should try to find
I'm
that.
sure I'll be able to find it somewhere.
It's
in the British Library.
it's obviously totally out of print,
Yeah.
and it may be out of existence.
It may
But-
well be in the British
And Paul Hoch is a bit of a nut and an egomaniac, but it describes what was happening at LSE, and it describes it from the perspective of Americans who were impatient with the, with the kind of old left mentality
Yeah.
of the British left.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was a very clear clash at the LSE.
And where does Harry Pincus fit in with this?
Harry Pincus was one of the people that pulled together the group that originally became Stop It.
Right.
And
he
he
was here.
he was not at the LSE, and I don't know why he was in London. Do you know?
No,
No, I
I
don't
don't
know
remember.
why. I don't know why he was there.
but he played a big role.
He did play a big
Yeah.
role.
But he was more. I'm waiting for Shelley to come in. Shelley, yeah. We're trying to remember things about Harry Pincus. He. So he lived. He had a big. It was on right in on halfway up the hill in
Yeah,
Hampstead. Yeah. And he had a big front living room,
Yeah.
which was a frequent place for meetings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's where the TV interview was with him.
Oh, yeah. But he was a single figure. It wasn't he wasn't in
Right.
some other group in
Right.
any way,
Right.
shape, or form. And
I don't
would
think
say,
he came out of the. I don't think he came out of the left in the United
No,
States.
no, I
I
was
think he
gonna
was
say-
just genuinely. He was a good liberal who was really upset about
he was
the
an
war.
angry liberal. That's
Yeah.
exactly what I would have said.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure his girlfriend at the time was a woman named Kerry Kelly.
Yeah, I got in touch with her as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you know who she is?
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And again, I mean, she lives in, I think, the Midwest somewhere, so I couldn't schedule an
Right,
interview this
yeah.
time. But yeah, she's happy to be interviewed as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
So they were together then, and then because on this, I mean, this list has about 100 of you there. Do you remember meetings being that big, or?
No, I don't
No,
think they were ever
20,
that big, but I
30,
think people
yeah.
would cycle through.
Yeah,
Yeah,
a lot.
yeah. And just to get a little bit of background in terms of what you were doing there, Henry, as well. So you were there from '66.
I came there in the summer of '66, and I
Did a
finally
master's.
left in the summer of '70.
And then Henry, you were...
So we came in late June of '64. I already had my MD, and I was there to start a new phase of my career, being a full-time researcher.
Right.
And so I was there on a postdoctoral fellowship from an American source, and I was at Mill Hill, if you know what that is.
Right.
That's the National Institute for Medical Research.
Right.
And that was a center, as it turns out, for immunology, which was my field.
Right.
So I got there and was on a postdoctoral fellowship from '64 through '67, when we came back to the States for 9 months. And then I went back, but this time as an employee of the Institute.
Right.
So I spent 3 more years, leaving in August of '70.
Right. Okay. And you met Shelley there, or?
No.
No.
We were
No,
already married, and we
went
had,
together.
yeah, we had been
Right.
together for
And-
so if that was '64, we just went through this. So we were married in '57, so we had a daughter when we came.
Right. Okay. And Shelley, were you at the university as well, or you were?
No, I was doing also postgraduate research in experimental psychology and child development.
Right.
But I was also raising a child, and I had another one 3 years later in London. So
Yeah. Busy.
yeah, so I was kind of busy.
Yeah. I kind of, I'm beginning
And you
to
know what that's
appreciate
like.
that now.
Yeah.
Why did nobody tell me it was so hard? Because they wanted grandchildren, I think, is
Exactly.
the answer to that.
And a little context, or more general cultural context about that time in the period. What I remember is arriving, and there I am at work right? The- There was a fascination with young Americans and the whole cultural revolution that was going on, not that it was called that. And I remember being asked to bring my collection of blues LPs, the new white urban blues movement, and people just sitting around day after day, just listening to those records and just being blown away. And then, of course, Dylan and everything else. So that impact of American culture and that it was shaking things up was very, very perceptible.
Yeah, yeah. You felt, I mean, that was...
That was definitely there.
And I suppose also there must have been a sense of... I mean, obviously the exchange rate then was insane, wasn't it? It was $3 to the... I don't know, £3 to the dollar, I mean, something. So, you know, this sense of, I don't know, being able to go where you wanted and do what you wanted.
That, yes, I mean, it was, in that sense, we had it made, even on tiny American salaries.
Yeah.
But with respect to stop-it activities, what I participated in a minor way, but I think of as being a real part of what Stop It was doing, is we were available as a speakers list. And so I would
Yeah, that was the main thing.
Yeah. Go off to Newcastle and talk about the anti-war movement in America.
So who would ask you to come? Was it British move?
There would be
local groups.
Yeah, I mean there were
colleges.
socialist societies at a lot of schools. There were Vietnam solidarity groups at a lot of schools, and so we would just get invitations all the time.
So there's one episode in Sheila's book about the period. Maybe that's what Shelley has. Do you have Sheila's book there? Is that what you have?
I have several, but
Well, it's in that one. She talks about my coming to a meeting in East London.
Right.
And she contrasts my style as typical American versus the style of the people at her meeting.
Huh, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
well, the style of the British left at the time was extraordinarily into faction fighting, and so it was, angry, it was theoretical, it was, it was a spirit of non-cooperation, really. And Sheila writes about that as well all the time. But, the Americans were like a breath of fresh air. And that's why, as Americans, we felt, after being there a while and having some popularity in this movement, that it was a form of cultural imperialism. That we didn't enjoy in retrospect. I mean, we probably enjoyed it at the time, but, we didn't feel it was right. We felt that, the British movement against the war had to develop its own culture.
Yeah.
At the moment, the culture was the culture that was inherited from the left. It was all the left groups that traditionally fought against each other. The communists against the Trotskyists, against the, various
against the
forms,
Trotskyists, against the Trotskyists.
against the Maoists, that, and so, Henry and I ultimately got involved with a Vietnam solidarity group that was also opposed to this kind of factionalism within the left and had a much more intelligent and inclusive vision of building a movement, which took some of its character from the American New Left.
Yeah.
But also, that many British people identified with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it wasn't necessarily a case of you setting out to influence or anything like that, but the British wanted to hear from you, and because
I know I was arrogant. I mean, I think a lot of us were arrogant. And in retrospect, I mean, we thought, hey, we know how to do this stuff, and we know what's happening. And you guys are, living, still debating the 30s. In retrospect, I mean, the British left had much better connections with the working class than we ever did, and so a lot of that was totally misplaced. But
And when
At
you
the time, we felt.
yeah, and when you talk about us, who are you exactly talking about? Are you talking about your Stop It or a wider
I'm talking
group of
about that there was a
Americans?
there was Stop It was the core, but then there was a whole, there was a much larger, can't think of the right word now, but there was a much larger group of people that would be coming through London, in and out of London, who had roots in the New Left in the United States.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
there was, the LSE again was a very, that was an amazing place to be at that
Yeah.
time, because there was so much political stuff going
Yeah,
on.
yeah.
And there were a whole bunch of Americans. Every year there'd be a new batch of Americans
yeah.
that would
yeah.
come over, and so this, it wasn't just a Stop It committee by any
Yeah.
means.
So
Yeah.
the identity was, I would say, primarily American and primarily New Left. And that was very inclusive. It was somewhat characteristic
Yeah,
of the style
yeah,
of the
yeah.
New Left at the
Right,
time.
right.
So within Stop It, people accepted that
Yeah.
we could have disagreements and yet still.
Yeah, you literally did not have to have a position on the Moscow trials in order
Yeah.
to participate in the group.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of other, on the British left, that was kind of the necessary, that was one of the tests that you had to.
Right.
Yeah, so.
And had you been a part of the SDS back here before you went to?
Muldoon, that was.
I had been before I
You
left.
you had been.
Yeah,
Um,
and I don't know about Amy and Shelley. I don't know. You guys were actually part of SDS or not?
No,
No.
No,
no.
I went to some meetings in California, but I was not a member.
No. So our origins by birth are from the old left. And I was actually in the party before the party disintegrated
Right.
around me.
yeah.
So that's,
Well, that's what happened.
that's what it
Oh,
really
okay.
did.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Didn't have to quit, it just, where is it? Where?
Right. Yeah.
And so you obviously had the the new left movement here, and you had the new left movement in Britain. And what really was the difference between the two? I mean, obviously you've been speaking a fair bit about how there was this sort of old left mentality in Britain, but obviously then you have the emergence of the new left. Do you think, was it coming? My history's a bit dodgy here. Did it come after the American new left, or?
Well, you go ahead and answer first.
So the new left in Britain, which never defined itself that way, was
Except for the women's movement. I think
well,
that's the one exception.
I was going to say, but it didn't define itself as new left. The women's movement was created with real influence by Americans, which Shelley can tell you about. That was real. Then there was things like Agitprop with this guy Muldoon. Shelley just remembered his
Right.
name.
Right.
Yeah,
His
right.
name was Muldoon. I have to remember his first
Right.
name.
Which,
He's not
street
mentioned.
theater also, and to give you an example of the sort of event that I think of as having influence without being able to trace any real structural influence. I remember,
Roland Muldoon.
Yes,
right,
that's right. Yeah.
right, was an
Roland.
early Stop It demonstration. By early, I mean 67. The primary organizer was a scientist, Richard Hammerschlag.
I've
And-
heard of them.
Yeah. And it featured Richard and whatever, a dozen of us walking around. Richard had a pig's head on a pole, and we visited, I don't remember which institutions.
I think we marched outside the U.S. Embassy.
That's,
Yeah, I think so too.
yeah. But that was the sort of thing, which nobody in
Yeah.
Britain at the time would have
Was-
thought of
was
doing.
doing.
Right, but that's the sort of thing that shook things up.
And the pig's head being emblematic of what
Right,
wasn't.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, of the pigs, right.
That's great.
Yeah.
And so, because I remember hearing about a group who, and I imagine this may have been the same thing, where somewhere in London they got, there was a guy who dressed up as I can't remember, a monkey or something, and he went, I think it was when you could still walk up Downing Street, and he went in before got on his knees before the door at 10 Downing Street and started begging Wilson to take him away to the war so he could start killing Vietnamese. And so there was that. And
I
then
don't remember that, but it sounds like.
there was another one with a group who dressed up as Uncle Sam and were recruiting members of the British bowler-hatted, who all kind of stooges in the crowd.
That sounds the kind of thing we would have
Richard,
done. I don't
Richard
remember
did
that.
that.
Yeah,
Richard
yeah.
Hammerschlag did
Yeah.
that.
Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
dressed up as Uncle Sam.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
And this group, this agitprop group, which is, I just found the reference to it in Google.
Yeah.
It was called CAST, the Cartoon Archetypal
Archetypal
Slogan Theater,
Right.
Nice.
run by this guy named Roland Muldoon, and they did things like that. For a very brief time, I don't know, there's more about him because he went on.
And do you remember how your relationship or your group's relationship with him developed, or how you kind of?
We
It
didn't
wasn't-
have a relationship.
no,
Oh, you just. Oh, right.
I
Just we're
just
talking about
know that-
influences.
Right, yeah.
Back,
Juliet Mitchell was involved with them in some way, and I met her. I don't remember how I met Juliet, but she had written about women's issues already. She'd written The Women's Estate, which was her book about the women's movement, about women and liberation. And somehow I learned that she was involved, and I think Sheila Rowbottom was, and I went to a number of their events. And later, Juliet was peripherally involved in the rebirth of the women's movement, the new women's movement.
Yeah.
But she was not as involved as Sheila Rowbottom and myself and Dave's wife at the time,
Right.
Karen Slater.
You should take a look at this.
What is this? I have no idea what you're showing me. Oh, my
That's the
picture.
one with the red.
Oh, God, yes.
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
It's fun talking about this stuff.
it's always fun, but I'm trying to remember. Roland Muldoon was a real theater person, and
Yeah, I mean, there was crazy stuff happening on
he was involved in Unity Theater.
Yeah. There was crazy stuff happening in the British left without us. I mean, not the British left, I mean the British countercultural, there was all the whole music scene was going crazy, and the dope
Yeah.
scene, and
Yeah,
there was all of that was going on.
yes, yes. Not to mention, the stuff that had happened prior to us coming there with the Black Panthers.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Which
Right.
Richard was slightly involved in, because I know that was the origin of the name Angry Orcs.
Hmm.
It came from something they did with the black militants in London.
Really? Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Henry knows more about that.
So, I mean, obviously, in America here, you had sort of, the women's movement had started significantly earlier than the British
A
movement.
bit earlier.
A bit earlier.
A bit earlier, maybe.
Months,
with
not
it-
years.
Yeah, months, not years.
And so, I mean, again, was that something that you feel as Americans you were influencing the British perspective there? Do you think?
No, I don't believe that. I think we played a major role because we were there was one group that Karen Slaney and I were in that was the coexisted with another group that were the first two women's liberation workshop groups in all of England.
Yeah.
And the other one was in Hackney, and Sheila Rowbottom started that group.
Right.
And independently, we were reading some pamphlets from America that had already been written about women. We had different reasons, perhaps, for starting our groups. Like the group Karen and I were in had a lot of women who had young children, and we were felt very oppressed as wives and mothers, and felt the need for solidarity with other women who want to be active and not just you know,
Mm.
chained to our children,
Mm.
even though we loved our children.
Mm.
But,
But you- But you
Yeah.
guys were a transmission belt for, I mean, you were
But
following
that-
what
no,
was
but that
going on in the
happened
United
then.
States, and you brought those ideas over there. I mean, they made it spread anyway.
but there were already
And there were
women,
other things,
including
yeah.
women in
Yeah.
LSE, who joined our group, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah, but that doesn't,
And, but our
She
group was
was
like
married.
half British and
Hmm?
half
She was
American.
married.
And we definitely had different ideas about organizing, and we were rebelling against the male-dominated way of acting and politically,
Yeah.
acting politically.
Yeah.
You know, there was no doubt about that. But at the same time, the women's movement in America was mushrooming.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, so obviously all that news came over and influenced what women did in
Yeah.
London. And then there were women workers who were identified with a lot of the co-educational, male and female groups of the socialist left and the union left,
Yeah.
who were interested because they were interested in women having equity in the work world.
Yeah.
And so somewhere around 1968, we had managed to organize a conference which was held at Ruskin College, and of women. And after that conference, which made lots of news, there were people were knocking on doors. We literally had to start new groups in order.
And what was the name of your group?
That was Women's Liberation Workshop.
Women's Liberation Workshop.
Yes, and each group had its own identity based on where it was. So there was a group in Peckham that was one of the earliest groups, Peckham women. Sheila Rowbottom writes about all of them.
Right. I'll read her work then. Yeah.
And
Writes well.
and so does Michelle Wander. She's another. I mean, all those women are still active and
Yeah.
and very. I mean, you know, they're teaching at universities. They're writing.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I mean, I'm very, obviously, as I said, it's such an early stage, but I want to be getting in touch with the Britons who were involved with
Yes.
all of you in,
Yes.
the multiple capacities with women's lib. It is something that I've not really touched on yet, but is obviously
Yeah.
a whole part of it. And I don't know. I suppose to an extent, was it? Felt this is men doing this. This is men making these decisions to go to war in Vietnam. This was, was that a part of your thinking as well? That this is, if it was women in control, it would be
No,
different.
it was more a reaction to the macho behavior of those men who were organizing protests against the war. We were equally involved in
Right.
protests against the war.
Yeah.
It's just that we had a different vision of how to organize people in general, and we felt that it was the right way of organizing for the entire left.
Yeah.
In fact, of organizing for revolution, if you will.
Yeah.
Like people felt that this was a new movement. It was literally part of the new left.
Yeah.
yeah, that's why I think that, I was not aware that there was a new left in England while I was there, except for the women's movement. I mean, that was the only place where I really saw the new left political principles in this country manifesting themselves in England.
Well,
I mean, there's a lot of cultural stuff going on, creative stuff, definitely a lot of creative stuff happening on the English countercultural movement. But in terms of a political movement, I wasn't aware of an English new left at that time. I wouldn't have known where it was, except in the women's movement.
Well, so there were two things that
And I was still arguing with the Trotskyists.
Right, but so the one organized group that I would know of was the VSC that we became part of, that became the Cambridge.
Well, that was like a very local.
Well, but it was. But
Yeah.
that's part of the point.
Yeah.
That they were wherever they were scattered did not try and form a national movement,
Yeah.
did not put out any manifesto, nothing like that.
Yeah.
What happened
There was no equivalent
local,
of SDS or
That's
anything
right.
close to it.
What
You
happened
had
was
the
local.
Port Huron statement, didn't you? The Port Huron statement, which kind of...
Yeah, and then there was,
so,
and then
yeah.
SDS mushroom, then it was huge in this
Right.
country.
And so Britain never had a similar...
Maybe after this, I mean, I
Or-
don't
at
know
this
what
point.
happened after 1970,
Yeah.
but there was
Well, wait a
nothing.
minute. Paris 68 was also a major force. Paris 68 and the German SDS and the French rebellion
Yeah.
was a very important new left phenomenon.
Yeah, but how much,
They came over to England.
yeah, they met with you.
They met with us, but they also spoke. I mean,
Yeah, but I mean, there was, I don't know that there was any organizational result of Paris 68.
no, but I think
in
they were
England.
inspirational for various people scattered throughout the left. Yes, I mean those poster workshops in May in Paris in May.
Oh, yeah,
68,
yeah, it was right.
all of that had an influence on elements of the left in Britain,
Right.
male and female.
Yeah.
But throughout universities,
And
there was no equivalent to the birth of SDSs
No.
throughout Britain.
No.
Not at all.
I mean, again,
LSE
the LSE, they continued to be a
What's
social society,
Yeah.
and it continued to be dominated by IS. And they did good things, they did some
Yeah.
very good things, but they were the dominant political force in the university, and there was no new left movement at the LSE, which I think was the most, far and away, the most politicized university at that time.
Yeah, yeah.
But
It
there
does
were
seem
other
to-
socialist groups that were sort of changing. I mean, what was it? Was it not Socialist Workers' Party, but the one Ed Guyton
SLL, SLP?
SLP.
No,
Social,
I don't think so.
They started out being very doctrinaire and all of that, but then I
No.
thought some of them changed.
There's one element here, and this is a
And this
theoretical
was like
point,
Leeds and
which
Sheffield.
I'm going to state without any evidence. But what Dave mentioned earlier about the differences between the left in the U.S. and the left in Britain, certainly by the 60s, and certainly in the New Left, no meaningful connection with the American working class. Zilch.
Yeah.
Where in Britain, that tie was real
Yeah.
and palpable,
Mm.
Yeah.
and people would not think of forming a new left movement that was not rooted in some way with the working class.
Mm.
And that, in
Yeah,
this
no, absolutely,
sense,
right.
you know,
Yeah.
acted as a brake on
Mm.
the
Yeah.
formation of new left groups
Mm.
that would be both new left and in the British tradition.
And the U.S. left's isolation of the working class was a terrible weakness, and the British left's connection with the working class was a great strength.
Right.
So,
But
Yeah.
for the women, that wasn't an issue per se.
right.
So, but though the women's movement, I don't think, had many working class adherents.
No, I don't think it did either.
It
Yeah.
had women whose origins were working
Oh, yeah,
class.
yeah.
Many, like, yes,
Yeah.
many, like the Peckham women.
Yeah.
But they were like a new changed group. They were, beginning to become college educated.
Yeah, it's a
They were-
first generation college
Yeah,
graduate.
yeah,
basically.
yeah.
And also there was a group that I'm not sure you may well have not heard of either, but Peace,
Peace?
People Emerging Against Corrupt Establishments. It was a GI group run by, well not run by, but Vanessa Redgrave was a bit of a figurehead for them. Had a clenched fist as on a helmet. Peace.
No, no,
That
no,
may
I mean,
have come later.
Yeah.
well, no, well, I don't, yeah. I mean,
I'm not-
this was part of the anti-war movement within the army.
Yeah.
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 Was she an active Trotskyist then?
Say again.
Yeah, she always said that.
She was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so yeah, they.
But no, we didn't.
I mean that obviously emerged in the military part of the GI movement. But did you guys or did people you know try and radicalise the GIs who were in Britain? Was there any
Well, I
connection
mentioned
there?
just before you came, the one episode that I remember in that regard, whether it was Stop It people, as Stop It people or people associated with Stop It, acting independently, we raised some money for the support of deserters and draft evaders, and somehow made it known that we could provide support. And we had somebody who came forward and asked for support. We put him up at the house of someone, and 2 days later he stole everything from the house. And we gave all our resources to the guy who had been ripped off, and that was the end of that.
Right.
And just spoke to our naivete.
But in retrospect, we were really negligent in not doing that, but we didn't. I don't know why we didn't, but we didn't. Because we were obviously aware of the anti-war movement within the Army in this country, but we just did not. At least I didn't.
Yeah.
Never even occurred to me.
Well, I spoke to, as I mentioned, Deirdre Griswold the other day, who was part of Bertrand Russell's War Crimes Tribunal. But she was married to Andy Stapp, who tried to unionise the army. He died a couple of years ago. But that link between the civilian movement, and part of what my project's looking at is the link between the civilian movement and the military in Germany as well. There's a bit of a comparison, and in Germany it seems. I mean, obviously it was a lot more. I mean, they were dealing with a lot more than the Britons were. I mean, obviously the division of Germany, but there seems to be a very strong connection between the STS there and the military. And but in Britain, obviously, you guys formed a significant part of the civilian anti-war movement. Why do you think it was that you didn't form a relationship with that?
If I speak personally, I think it was just like class differences, and we weren't. I mean, we were just organizing a different group of people. But I don't have a good answer. I mean, I don't have it.
So,
in hindsight, obviously, we should have.
so on behalf of Stop It, on 2 occasions, I was asked to be a spokesperson and go and lobby members of parliament to ask them to provide support and hopefully sanctuary for deserters. Not that that got anywhere, but so.
But we never reached out to the bases to see if we never tried to set up coffee shops or make contact with people on the basis.
There was a split in the American movement about doing that. Like PL, wanted to support the GIs, and the communist-based movements would have opposed that. And a lot of the New Left thought, there was a whole element within the New Left who thought of soldiers as being a conscious part of the American war machine and to be opposed.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
It's not that you agree with it.
Yeah, no, I don't agree with it, and I think that anyway, it doesn't matter. I think the predominant sentiment on the left in this country was that we should try to win over the GIs. There was a big coffee house movement and a lot of effort put into that. But anyway, but the bottom line is we didn't do it in London and England, and I don't have a good answer why. If I were going to do it over again, I'd try to do it.
There is a document somewhere, and it's just a vague recollection of this, of a coffee shop, and I'm pretty sure it was your group, and I don't know if it was your name on it, but the idea of setting up a coffee shop in Cambridge.
Cambridge, England?
Yeah.
Wouldn't have been
It wouldn't have been us.
Yeah.
And do you remember something about a bombing of a headquarters, or an attempted sort of bombing of headquarters of Stop It in England?
No.
So you have to go over these documents again. It's just come back to me or something.
Maybe the police knew about it. They never told us.
Yeah. And did you have?
I mean, you should just say parenthetically that a lot of the stuff that you find, at least in FBI files, is based on informants that are notoriously untruthful. No, a pinch of salt with a lot of it. And did you have particular roles? I mean, were you given a role within Stop It that you worked under
We were talking about that. And my memory was that there was a guy who lives nearby, Jim Kaplan, who I thought of as being chair of Stop It at one point,
But,
late.
right, but my memory is that in typical New Left fashion, it was a pretty loose
Yes,
Right.
group,
absolutely.
and, you know,
Yeah.
anybody could basically step up and do anything.
And,
It wasn't you know, we didn't have an elected leadership.
so there was no real structure to it. It was,
No, I mean, you
Turnover
we-
was huge.
Yeah, we would call the
From
next,
meeting to
you'd
meeting.
set the next meeting, and when we came to the next meeting, we'd set the policy for the next period of time until the meeting after that. Basically, that's true, right? I mean,
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the way it worked.
Absolutely.
and how regular were the meetings? They kind of happen when
We
they
met
happen.
fairly often, at least once a month,
Yeah.
probably more than that.
Yeah.
I still remember the meeting we had while we were watching the Tet Offensive unfold on the TV screen in the pub. That was a great meeting. But anyway, yeah. Yeah, so you know, it was again just New Left principles, you know,
Yeah.
in spades.
Yeah.
There was no hierarchy, no real structure. I mean, there must have been somebody who answered the mail or who got the mail or
Yeah, I
something,
mean,
but-
Harry Pincus's name is over
Yeah.
a lot of it.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, he just keeps cropping up as somebody who was
But when did
chief
he
organizer.
kill himself?
It was around the same time, 70, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it that late, 70?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Was he in London that whole time until
Use
70?
your bathroom.
of course.
Is that okay?
We'll
Thank you.
vote on
Down
it.
with him.
I'll